All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're essentially holding up a diagnostic mirror to uncover the real physical and emotional toll of the stress we face every single day. I mean, we all talk about being stressed out, right? But we rarely stop to actually look at what that really means for our bodies and our minds on a clinical level. So, we're going to break down the exact signs, symptoms, and specific types of stress based on psychological research, giving you a crystal clear framework to understand exactly what is happening just under the surface.
Let me ask you something. Have you been dealing with frantic bursts of energy, maybe some extreme mood swings, or even just unexplainable backaches recently? You might actually be relating to some of these feelings right now. Well, let's explore why these specific, really jarring disruptions are happening to your body and mind. It is so incredibly common to just brush these things off as, having a bad week. But research actually shows these are highly specific markers of an organism whose equilibrium has been totally thrown out of whack.
So first things first, identifying your stress symptoms and really recognizing those early warning signs.
You see, everyone has their own unique pattern of stress response. And honestly, the very first step to understanding it is recognizing your own personal warning signs. What's really fascinating here is just the sheer variety of ways stress manifests. We see cognitive effects, right? Like a sudden lack of concentration or memory loss. We see behavioral impacts, where someone might exhibit poor decision-making or just become really inconsistent. Then you've got this emotional and physiological crossover, frantic bursts of energy, extreme mood swings, worry, anxiety, and depression. And critically, we see actual physical illness, things like stomach upsets, a pounding headache, or that backache we mentioned earlier. We're looking at a massive range of symptoms here, which absolutely proves that stress isn't just in your head. It actively attacks your cognitive abilities and your physical health. It's a complete, full-body response.
Here's the wild part, though. These symptoms don't just happen in a vacuum. The research outlines 3 major types of stress: physical, environmental, and psychological. But they don't exist independently. They are deeply interrelated. A physical symptom can so easily be triggered by an environmental stressor, which then creates psychological pressure. Think about it. An environmental stressor might totally ruin your sleep, which leads to physical stress, which then completely lowers your resilience and amplifies your psychological stress the very next day at work. They literally feed right into each other.
All right, moving right along to physical and environmental stress, the external forces and surroundings that we constantly have to navigate. There's a crucial difference here between the physical strains we often put on ourselves versus the external world we're forced to deal with. On one hand, physical stress actively changes the state of our body. That's when we overexert ourselves physically, maybe fail to eat a nutritious diet, suffer an injury, or just flat out don't get enough sleep. Now contrast that with environmental stress. These are the completely unavoidable aspects of our surroundings that we simply have to endure. This includes everyday daily hassles like air pollution, crowding, and noise, scaling right up to extreme weather or catastrophic disasters like floods and fires. So it's really the difference between the physical strains we often impose on ourselves, like that lack of sleep, versus unavoidable environmental chaos, like noise and pollution. But then we turn inward, to the weight of psychological stress. These are the pressures we generate all by ourselves. Let's see how this builds, because this is where it gets super fascinating and kind of brutal. Worry, anxiety, and depression are not just symptoms of stress. They actually cause further stress. It creates this vicious cycle. Our internal emotional reactions to a problem end up generating a whole new layer of stress. We literally become stressed about the fact that we are stressed, which just compounds that psychological burden immensely. To really wrap our heads around this internal weight, we've got to break it down into 4 distinct sources of psychological stress identified in the research. Think of these as the 4 engines driving that internal pressure: frustration, conflicts, internal pressures, and social pressures. Let's examine how each one uniquely disrupts our mental equilibrium. First up, frustration. We've all been there. This results from the blocking of needs and motives by something or someone that hinders us from achieving a desired goal. The research gives some stark examples. It could be a massive systemic barrier, like social discrimination, a personal setback, like interpersonal hurt, or an academic hurdle, like getting low grades in school. Frustration hits when your path is blocked, instantly spiking your stress levels because your forward momentum is just suddenly halted. Next up, we have conflicts. And no, this isn't about arguing with someone. This is a deeply internal battle of incompatible needs. It happens when you are completely torn between 2 paths, like having to choose between studying dance or studying psychology, or deciding between continuing your schooling and taking up a job. This kind of internal tug of war drains massive, massive amounts of psychological energy.
Then we have our third source, that voice in your head saying, I must do everything perfectly. That captures internal pressure to a T. These pressures stem from beliefs based on expectations we place on ourselves. When we drive ourselves ruthlessly toward unrealistically high standards, we practically guarantee our own disappointment and stress. It is a self-imposed trap where the only possible outcome is feeling like we've fallen short, which generates relentless internal anxiety.
And finally, the whole shebang wouldn't be complete without social pressures. These are brought about by people who make excessive demands on us or individuals with whom we face a genuine personality clash. Working with people who demand way too much or just completely clash with our personality creates an immense internal burden. You can manage your physical health and your internal expectations perfectly, but navigating a toxic interpersonal dynamic can still completely flood your system with stress.
So we've looked in the mirror, we've seen the symptoms, and we've decoded the physical, environmental, and psychological triggers, which brings us to a final, absolutely crucial question for you. Which of these invisible stressors is currently driving your physical symptoms, and where is it truly coming from? As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to look at your own life and ask yourself, which of these root causes is creating your symptoms? Because identifying the source, that's the very first step to beating it. Are your sudden mood swings coming from a lack of sleep or from a hidden psychological conflict? Take a hard look at your own stressors today and start untangling the web.